welcome back to Soaring Profits Live, 9 p.m. on YouTube and Twitter. And we have a wonderful guest tonight, another positive role model for our community, a resourceful, wonderful person who is out there fighting for the rights and wellness of animals. Malcolm Bernstein
and
is
Malcolm.
Sorry?
And Malcolm.
And Malcolm. Malcolm Bernstein is a human resources management professional and full-time animal lover. He works in roles in the private and public and non-for-profit sectors. Apparently my lips aren't working today. Sorry. And he also is in the consulting sector. But he has a commitment to animals and their welfare. And this kind of took the form of the Benjamin Project, a nonprofit initiative he founded in memory of his dog, Benjamin. He also serves for the board of Toronto Humane Society, and he lives in Toronto. And apparently his better, much, wow, there's lots of muches here. I don't know who wrote this.
I wrote this.
Better half Helen brought Benjamin into their lives, for which he is extremely grateful to both have Benjamin and apparently Helen.
Absolutely.
So Malcolm, just a wonderful topic. I know I did a little reading on the Benjamin Project, and it seems like your biggest focus is teaching children how to be good helpers and stewards of animals. And so maybe you could tell us what motivated you. Like, how do you go from being someone who takes on a rescue like Benjamin to now being on the Toronto Humane Society board and running this beautiful Benjamin Project, where I understand you wrote 2 books and you've raised, is it $15,000 already on those books?
Well, as of the end of this year, we're up to 25,000.
Right. How do you go from, what you did do before to this? What kind of motivation and what was the journey that led you there?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm really honored to be here and grateful for the opportunity. And I still work, by the way, although I shouldn't say that because Helen doesn't want to hear it, but it's very, very true. The truth of the matter is that a lot of the drive for me came from Benjamin, and a real desire to honor his life. So we had Benjamin for 13 incredible years. They were the best years of our lives. Helen went looking for a dog for my 50th birthday, unbeknownst to me. And she'd been speaking to a shelter, and they said, we have a little boy here, and he's not glamorous, but the most laid back boy we've ever seen. Would you like to come and take a look? We went up and saw him, and it was love at first sight. And the rest of the 13 years were great history. So we lost Benjamin in 2013. It's about 14 and a half or 15 at the time. And I had a compelling need to do something to honor his life. I actually had started writing a book about him, the first book, as a feel-good story when he was about 7 or 8. But because of my work, I could never get around to finishing it.
Right.
And so when we lost him, and it was a very difficult time towards the end, I knew that I had to finish this book and start a nonprofit in his memory, which is the Benjamin Project. And so that's how this all came about, and the reason behind it. And the mission of the Benjamin Project is twofold. One is to educate kids on responsible pet ownership, and to try and make some kind of contribution to a world whereby animals are valued and respected and as sentient beings that they are, and that one day, long past my lifetime, we may not need shelters, or not near to the same extent, because animals will grow up as part of families, and they won't end up on the streets like he did, running around, skin and bones, nowhere to go. So it was our great fortune that happened to us. But the mission is to try and and create a world where it doesn't happen to other animals. So that the education is one part of it. The other is fundraising. And so I wrote the first book about Benjamin. It came out in 2014. Then wrote a kids book, which came out in 2019. And Lisa Browning, who's my publisher and an incredibly, just an exceptional person. I believe you know Lisa.
Oh, yes.
Is the publisher of 1,000 Trees and based in Guelph. And she published the kids book pro bono.
Wow.
And so the second book came out, and basically all the funds from both books are donated to shelter sanctuaries and rescue organizations. And then we wrote another book, 2019 or 2020, which Lisa also published, edited and published pro bono. And it's a pet anthology. And it was written by some 20 authors across the country. It's quite unique. It's about animals and our emotional well-being. Hand illustrated by an artist, Dr. Irene Octaba in Sault Ste. Marie. And by the way, the book is on Lisa's site, and I'd like to give a plug for it if I could.
Absolutely.
And she can fulfill orders for that book anytime, and it's really special. So the books are a big part of my life, and that's kind of a little bit about the project and how and kind of what we do.
Well, there's a lot there. It's wonderful. Thank you for coming on the show, and I'm sorry for your loss. I have a dog myself, and I know my life would be vastly different without him. So I'm really sorry that happened. I can see why it would be a tragedy. One of the things that I sometimes talk about is that I think it's a beautiful thing that when tragic things happens, like you said, you wanted something good to come from his death. And I think what you have here is a beautiful testament to who he is. And, you have that legacy for him. He'll be remembered long past you because there's books about him and there's books about other animals. And that's a beautiful thing. Thank you for doing that. But what I kind of was wondering, so one of the first things you were talking about is teaching kids about being stewards for animals. Maybe you could explain that a little bit more. Like, are you going into schools, libraries? Is it through the books? Or how do we teach kids to be more stewards and better stewards? And what does that mean at the end of the day?
Sure. So it is through the books, actually. And so I have a presentation about Benjamin, and it's actually on the Benjamin Project website. And I have spoken to well over 1,000 kids in schools, nice. Primarily, but also Humane Society camps. I've spoken to kids at deaf-blind schools with actually an interpreter that they'll provide me to tell his story, and spoken, for that matter, to kids of all ages right through their 90s in nursing homes and everywhere else in between. But in the classroom, what the schools will do is bring kids into the auditorium, and the presentation's about an hour, and kids come up and read from the book. So they're part of the whole experience. They're part of the presentation. That's Benjamin with my hat, and yeah, cover of our website. And they just love what I've heard from teachers and from educators is that they've never seen this kind of rapt attention.
Right.
It's the story about Benjamin. It's who he was. It's how he lived his life. It's all the anecdotes, all true stories that I tell along the way. This is the hand illustrated cover of the kids book. All the illustrations in there were our original works. Mm-hmm. And they just love the story. They love being part of it. At the end of it, they get a Benjamin Booster certificate, and essentially it's a pledge to live their lives the way he did, which was a loving, giving, kind, wonderful, sentient being, and to honor animals throughout their life and make the world a better place by doing it. So that's kind of the nature of the work we do with kids, and in schools, and that's by the way, the third picture top. Well, all those paintings done by are also original art by Sandra Wilson, my publicist and website designer. And that third one in with the reading glasses, that's Benjamin. And Sandra did all this work originally. And this is from the 2023 calendar. So that's another fundraising item for us, that's published every year by the printing house that does it, as well as a donation to the Benjamin Project.
That's amazing. So a couple of times now you've mentioned that animals are sentient beings. Maybe you could explain that a little bit more. What is a sentient being, and how does that relate to animals in any way?
So, and so much of this is in literature now. It's written about, but so much of it came as well from our lives with Benjamin. I mean, he was a little boy who there wasn't anything he didn't meet, two-legged, four-legged, winged, that didn't instantly gravitate to him, just wanted to be with him, and that he didn't love. I can talk about stories, and I write about them in my book. For example, one evening when we had friends come over, and the names are in the book, so I'll talk about Rita and Dave. And Rita was very afraid of dogs. And we had just got Benjamin, so they wanted to come over, but she was terrified of dogs. So there are four of us sitting around the family room. Who do you think Benjamin goes to sit next to all night?
Right.
Doesn't leave her side. And the end of the night, her hand is petting his head. And like, for her, it was transformational. And for me, it just underscored what a knowing being he was.
Yeah.
When we drove down that spring from Toronto to our hometown of Montreal, and brought him up to see my parents, and I write about this in the book as well. My dad was an animal lover, but he was struggling with illness at that time, really bad arthritis in his neck. Just sitting on the bed, Benjamin strolls into the room, jumps on the bed, and lies down right next to him. I mean, it was truly remarkable. Nose to nose with a baby bird, and just lying there until I come along and say it's going to be okay. This to me is a knowing being. So what a sentient being is all about. But we hear about, and I speak to kids about animals who help our society. I mean, seeing eye dogs, animals that rescue people, animals that are trained to sniff out disease, help people with epilepsy. So, and I'm talking about dogs, let alone other animals in our world. And there's a couple of videos on our site, and they're off of YouTube or mainstream news. One dog called Storm that swims out to rescue a baby deer that's drowning, and brings it back by the scruff of its neck to the shoreline. Another is a story about Tara, this elephant living in an animal sanctuary in Tennessee, with Bella, a little mutt, and they're inseparable. And one day Bella has surgery in the animal hospital at the sanctuary, and Tara stands outside that building for 3 weeks and doesn't move until they bring Bella out. So to me, these are sentient beings. They're knowing beings. Yeah. They have sensory perception that we can't even, frankly, imagine. For me, that's what I'm trying to honor here.
Totally agree. So I'm a landlord, and the profiteers out there know that. And I always have Charlie involved in all the time, anytime I interview a new possible tenant. And there are times that Charlie goes right over and he's like super interested in them. There's other times that he's under me and he's just like watching them in the corner of the eye. And I'm like, yeah, you're not going to live here. I trust Charlie's judgment more than anyone else's in the world. And you're not going to live here. He doesn't growl. He doesn't get upset with them. He just comes right under my legs and he's like, nope, I don't like this one.
He's not great at tribunal hearings, but until you get there, he's pretty good. Yeah. No, Malcolm, I think it's fantastic what you've done here. You've taken something that's near and dear to your family, and you've looked at how to give it back. And, talking about Lisa, she's kind of has a special place in our world with all the individuals that we've, encountered through Lisa, as she's probably listening right now, so I'll pump her tires. We tend to do that. Yeah. But we just finished a project with her down in Guelph over the weekend and filming with Recovery Speaks Initiative. And this was a group of individuals that had overcome, I guess is, one way of putting it, if there ever is an overcome, sexual violence. And we were down doing a live podcast shooting with them. And every one of them has a unique story of, how they overcame their trauma and what that looked like. And there was a lot of people that had stories when you kind of drill down into them, is that, I had this love for animals. I had a cat, I had a dog, I had a fish, I had a bird, I had a whatever, that really kind of were a part of that process. Someone that they could almost confide in their childhood, in their youth. And yourself then going out and passing that on to the community, I think that's fantastic. I think that's very cool. Yep.
He helped us get through difficult times. You have loss of other family members, and he was just so fundamental in getting through those instances. And I think that the part about the story that's the most painful, but I speak to kids about it as well, because they have to know, is that you're gonna likelihood outlive your pet, right? And it could be very difficult at the end. And I didn't do the best job of handling that with him. But I want kids to learn from our experience and honor your pet. And that includes at the end as well.
Well, you say that, right? That, that was a difficult process, but I think that probably that difficult process is what's built to where you are now. Right. And I think that goes back to exactly what we were talking about over the weekend, is that Benjamin and that process of, being a fantastic pet for you, as well as, the relationship that obviously you guys had, or you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. When he passed away, that's now motivated you to go out and kind of spread the news, spread that good word in regards to what you're doing, which is powerful. So myself, I've got about a 70-pound golden retriever, purebred. And this is where I kind of come to my next question is, so I bought a dog for my very young daughter at the time, and I didn't know a whole lot about dogs, didn't know a whole lot about pets, but loved golden retrievers. So I thought I'm going to go buy a golden retriever from a breeder. Now, obviously, when you have the Humane Society and another thing that you're super passionate about, what is the difference, and why should one happen and why should maybe another one happen? What's your opinion on that?
In terms of the two kinds of organizations, a breeder versus rescues?
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, from my perspective, they're both great. I think we all feel the same way about your prototypical puppy mills, and
right,
they're completely predatory and no place in the world for them. But breeders who are honorable, ethical, and love what they do, I just think it's totally fine, more than fine. And
so is that a major problem, Malcolm? Are you seeing a rise in puppy mills? Are you seeing those organizations that are kind of that problematic institution? Are you seeing a lot of that still, or are people much more aware of those groups of people?
I think as a society, we're much more aware that animals are sentient beings and they deserve to be raised and treated properly throughout their lives. And the problem is that if you're buying an animal from a puppy mill, you may not know it.
Right.
That's really the problem. But we do still see them, and we see cat colonies where they're just completely exploited or under nourished and maltreated. That's where places like the Humane Society come in. Toronto Humane Society, which does a fantastic job, Burlington Humane, Guelph Humane, and so on and so forth, where we are, I guess, maybe the custodian of last resort, if I could put it that way.
Right.
We bring these animals in, even when our capacity financially and space-wise is stretched to the limit.
Yep.
We rehabilitate them, and we go out of our way to find them a forever home,
right,
a really good forever home. So they're still out there. It's completely unsavory. I guess we're all trying to create a world where people like this are, frankly, not only put out of business, but put away, quite frankly.
Right.
But until they aren't, there are places like humane societies that play a very important role, and they also play a role for people who may run into tough times
Absolutely.
and have to, relinquish their pet as a last resort.
Now, do you see a lot of that, Malcolm, where financial constraints end up, pushing a otherwise loving home situation into a bit of a catastrophe?
We we've seen, you do see a reasonable amount. We are seeing more of it during and coming out of the pandemic.
That's what I was going to think. Yeah.
When it's been a really rough go, obviously, for society for the last 3 years. People have lost jobs, and we all know what we're going through now in terms of inflation.
Yep.
It's a rough time for a lot of people, and so shelters, by and large, are seeing an increase in surrenders.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there's a story, and we were prominent in that, Toronto Humane Society, in the sense that just in the last couple of weeks, there was a little pup who was left abandoned, a pup called Max, with a tag on a little story which said, "I'm Max, 4 years old. My owner had to give me up. Please rescue me, help me out." I ended up at Toronto Humane. This is just in the last couple of weeks. That's, a poignant, heart-wrenching story about someone who just couldn't cope with different things going on in their life for all kinds of reasons, and we were fortunate that he ended up with us, and hundreds of calls later, he's now, with all the right screening, in a forever home.
That's awesome.
But what we do have at Toronto Humane, and perhaps other shelters as well, is a program whereby we will foster an animal so that an owner doesn't have to surrender until they're back on their feet. We also do a lot of work with people shelters to help people who are themselves going through a tough time and are in a human shelter keep their pet.
Wow.
And we provide food for shelters as well. That's something that our CEO and senior team started. And so those are the kind of things that you say, geez, you know what, that's really very special work. And whatever we can do to keep families together, that's what it's all about.
That's incredible. So if I was struggling with Charlie here, my dog, and I came to the Toronto Toronto Humane Society, similar, and I said to you, you know what, I don't think I can handle having Charlie around anymore. Is there any legality for that? Am I in trouble, or is it like so you often hear about them dropping the dog off and running away? So is that something I should worry about, or can I show up proud and go, you know what, it's just not a good fit. I'm really sorry. How can I help? What's the process there? I think some people must be afraid that if I come into the Humane Society, I'm going to be in trouble.
So that's a great question, and I'll answer it as best I can, being on the board and knowing what I know from that perspective. But I don't know the inner workings of how the programming, and we as a board are trying to be careful about not intruding into the operations either. And we have a great management team, so we shouldn't be. But that said, you'd never have to worry about walking into the Toronto Humane Society, and I suspect a lot of other shelters as well, and feel that you're going to be reproached or that you're going to be anything other than treated with dignity and respect. You shouldn't, and you certainly wouldn't in our case, that I can say categorically. What we will do is go out of our way to explore what is going on with in your situation, and how can we help, and how can we help if there's a will to stay with you, to keep your animal with you, then what can we do to enable that? Once again, I don't know the inner workings of the intake process, but at the end of the day, if you can't manage it and you sign off on all the appropriate papers, then legally you're surrendering your animal, but you're doing it with dignity and respect. You'd never have to worry about walking in, that's for sure.
Yeah. So Malcolm, in that situation, obviously you folks, I believe, are a not-for-profit, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So your funding models, it sounds like you've done a fantastic job with the Benjamin Project in looking briefly on the website, $25,000. That is not an insignificant amount of money. Now, those funding models for Toronto Shelter, Guelph Shelter, Peterborough Shelter, are there municipal budgets that are coming into that, or what does that sort of look like?
So once again, I'm not sure about any other jurisdiction. In our case, we receive no government funding whatsoever.
Wow.
So we're one of the largest shelters in North America, with one of the biggest offerings in terms of programming and public veterinary services and education services and so on, and a large shelter. I mean, at one point pre-pandemic, we had on any given night of the week up to 250 to 300 animals in the shelter, across species.
Wow.
And what we've done during the pandemic, of course, like everyone else, is pivoted and built out the foster care network. So we have, a couple hundred animals in foster homes, fewer in the shelter, which we also need to do, and was part of our strategic plan, to try and have a more manageable cost base as well.
Right.
So we don't have government funding. It's all by virtue of fundraising and bequests. And so it's
a lot of that.
The bequests.
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it in terms of a lot, but suffice it to say that it's an important part of our financial model.
Wow.
Even though we try and run the shelter without relying on it.
Right.
In fact, we're intent on not relying on something like that. But it's incredibly helpful,
right.
When we do get a bequest.
Wow.
So, but we don't get any government funding. So it's long and short of it, it's a really tough go.
Right.
To pay the bills with ever increasing costs, cost of food, cost of vet care, medicine, staffing, and the like. And got to have a great fundraising team behind you, which we do. Really dedicated people, which we do, none of whom earn a lot of money.
Right.
But it's tough. It's really tough financially to make a go of it.
Well, it certainly does sound like these are the passion projects, right? It's you're out there, $25,000 from a couple fantastic books. I think that's a very cool thing.
And
I know. Sorry?
And the pet anthology that Lisa was instrumental, that also has brought in a lot of good money, which we turn around and give away.
Right. Fantastic. So in our community here, we're in Peterborough, Ontario, and we have just put in a massive facility. We had, the old pound, terrible way of kind of putting at it, but the old pound of what it was a very dark, dingy, awful looking building on kind of the outskirts of our community. And now we are in the process of building, I think it's a $2.7 million building. Wow. With it's wild. Wow. And it's stirred some political problems in our community when we look at some of the homelessness issues, addictions issues, and that, and as well as, the amount of money that's going into this process. Is that something that sometimes you have feedback from or work to push against on, the animals versus, and I hate to put it that way, the homeless and the addicted and that sort of thing? But it sounds like you're not getting that funding directly. It sounds like you folks are doing it yourself.
Well, we don't get funding from any government source, so we're not taking away from anyone else.
Right.
In our case, it's a tough one. At the end of the day, and my work is in developmental services sector with people who have developmental disabilities. At the end of the day, we're talking about the most vulnerable of the vulnerable.
Right.
Be it homeless, people with addictions, people with intellectual disabilities, animals on the street, animals in shelters, right? So if you think about it that way, I mean, we're all part of a greater, I don't know what the word is, cosmos, whatever that means,
right.
Greater world. And we're all in it together. and so it's really hard to differentiate one from the other, and I don't think it serves much purpose. I do understand if funds are flowing one way or the other, that could engender some antipathies or rouse some passions. One thing, now that you ask about it or you mention it, that we do, and once again, our CEO and our management team at Toronto Humane have been really key in pursuing this, is providing the veterinary care and the food for a new youth shelter that opened up where the kids are keeping their pets with
Cool.
them.
Yeah.
So now that you mention it, and I'm sure there's lots of issues associated with this, but imagine a shelter where, be it homeless, because a number of homeless people have pets, which actually are their lifeline.
Right.
Not a great life for either one of them, but it's their lifeline. And they won't give their animal up either.
Yeah.
Imagine a shelter where you could have both cohabitating.
Yeah.
That'd be something.
Yeah, no, that's a very cool idea. Very cool idea.
Back in the day, I quite a while ago when I was young, younger than Pat even, I worked in it wasn't a retirement home, but it was linked to the hospital. It was kind of a place where for elderly who needed extra care, more care. And quite often, a couple of times a week, these ladies would come in with their dogs, the caring dogs, and they'd come in, and the lit up faces in that room, the animation, they went from like just sitting there, not engaged in the world, to fully engaged in the world, and the difference was phenomenal. Like people were like, if they couldn't talk, they were still making noises. They were reaching forward. And it was just such a beautiful thing to see. And like, so I get what you're saying, like in the youth shelter, to be able to have your pet with you, to be able to like, because you're already losing so much. And I know that a lot of times we have this great missionary, Scott, who works in our community, and he helps out the homeless a lot. And he talks about their items being important. And for them to go to a homeless shelter or go somewhere else, when they leave their personal space, they lose all their items because other people take them. And when you are that transient where you may lose everything when you go into a shelter, I think it's beautiful that you're helping them to retain that beautiful item, that thing that your best friend, the fact that you're letting them retain their best friend. Going back to the children and being a steward for the animals, like I think it's super important. Like I know every Easter we get a bunch of bunnies flowing around our area that are free range that I know don't belong here. And we get there's more cats in our area because Trent students will be going home, and sometimes they can't take their cats home. I guess what my question is, what do you think should be done about those things? Like, so once a pet becomes a nuisance, once a pet becomes, I don't want this pet anymore, I can't train them, I can't do anything about it, what are things I should be doing?
For me, it's all about responsibility.
Right.
And that's why the first part of the mission of the Benjamin Project is all about teaching responsible pet ownership.
Right.
I guess, should is a value judgment, but I'll make it anyway. And that's that you took an animal in your life and giving it up because you want to move on, like you're through a Trent or whatever. That's just not an option. Come up with a better answer.
Right.
You've got to figure this out, but that's not an option. And so I'm not sure this is answering your question exactly, James, but my answer would be that you have a responsibility to do better than that. And then, let's talk about what that might look like. That's fair. That's a fair conversation.
I think when you kind of look back on all of the information we put out over the last number of years, I'm a child of the 90s, And I remember Bob Barker getting up there, spay and neuter your pets and help control the pet population. And I remember as a child, that was kind of I don't know what those words mean, but we're controlling the pet population. And that was a message that guy spread to millions of people every afternoon. Every kid that was ever sick home from school asked mom and dad that afternoon, I don't know what spading and neutering is, but fill me in on it, right? Yeah. No, I'm a firm believer in that. My family, we have horses. We're in the equestrian business, agricultural business, and separating the two things from business and pleasure in dealing with animals is such a unique thing. And our family has almost gotten a bit of a bad name over the years because we have race horses as well as we have hunter jumpers and Western pleasure horses and that sort of thing. We get a bit of a bad name in the industry sometimes is that because our race horses, when they go somewhere else, never do as well. And a lot of it comes down to is that they kind of become family members and pets when they're with us and they do really well. Then they go to the next guy who's not like that. And they just never quite have that same success as they did with us. And like you said, that sentientness that goes into those animals, it's really powerful. And especially in these are athletes at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like you're demanding these animals do amazing, wonderful, crazy things.
Yeah.
And they just aren't going to do it the same way for a situation that isn't quite as respectful or helpful, right?
And they know it instantly, of course, and they feel it. You talked about the pet therapy side of things,
right?
And talk about horses. There's a video on as part of the presentation. It's probably on the presentation on my site as well. Peo, the therapy horse. I don't know if you heard the story, but
not Peo, but yeah, no, I do know the therapy process. They're fantastic. Yeah.
Well, so there's riding for the disabled and that kind of thing. This horse actually is a therapy horse, so it's a race horse. But when he's not racing, his owner takes him into hospitals. And we're talking about sentient beings. Yeah. He stops outside, and it's on the video. You can see it happening. Yeah. Outside of the rooms with the sickest patients, the ones who are basically on their deathbed.
Wow.
And you see him walking into the room and comforting someone who's in palliative care. And the expression on some of the patients' faces is nothing short of remarkable and incredibly touching. Benjamin was trained as a therapy dog. He aced his training, but he was so exuberant that we just couldn't do it because he wanted to run around visiting everyone and nurses and people, and he wasn't the kind of dog to just sit there.
And anyone that knows my dog, his name is Bauer, and again, about a 70-pound golden retriever that if he doesn't have a shoe in his mouth when you're coming to the front door with a it's not Tuesday. Yeah. Right? Like, what did I do? Like, did I run a stop sign coming over here? What do you know that I don't know about this, right? But no, it is wild. And my dog is this beautiful kind of caramel colored golden. And I have had some of the wildest days of my life. And that guy just comes over and flops that head on my lap, and you just kind of right behind the ear, and you know that everything's going to be okay. And there is something very beautiful about that relationship between man and animal, and you just can't replace that with anything. So
it's instant.
Absolutely. And that's where I think a lot of us here, we thank people like you that are going out there and going out of their way to allow these organizations to exist and to support them, because a lot of us don't kind of think about it until after the fact, when your dog is maybe not with you anymore and the relationship that you had is no longer there. So I thank you for what you do, and I think it's fantastic, and we'll have some more books hopefully coming in the near future to keep raising some money for you.
Well, thanks. That would be great. And for that matter, I'm open to doing a fundraiser for any animal shelter anywhere. Peterborough, right through to, the Northwest Territories. And all they got to do is reach out, and we'll be there to do it and give all the funds to that shelter. be a pleasure.
So if they come on to the Benjamin Project, which you have a website, we just had it up there.
Yeah.
They just type in the Benjamin Project,
Right.
and I know that they can contact you on Facebook, Instagram, and maybe
Well,
Twitter.
Sandra Wilson, my webmaster, tells me they can. I wouldn't have a clue, but I'm
So yeah, at the bottom, I
He's right.
found those sites. When I was doing the social media there, I was kind of linking to your the Benjamin Project, stuff like that. So is that the best way to contact you? If say Peterborough, they'd like to do a fundraiser where they'd like to raise some money for maybe to do that thing where they help people keep their dogs in their homes.
They can use the funds for whatever they think is appropriate, but it's a great family outing or kids outing or community outing. And I was up in Sault Ste. Marie a couple of years ago, and we raised a ton of money for the local shelter by virtue of a major the presentation I did at their beautiful library and their atrium. So whatever they want to do with the money is fine. Right. And they can reach me by virtue of the info address on the Sandra tells me is on our site, or Malcolm Bernstein at simpatico.ca, which is my email, or just give me a call on my phone number, and I'm happy to give it to you, and that way as well.
Well,
go ahead.
You've certainly piqued my interest in reaching out to the local community here and seeing what that looks like. And if there's something that we can partner with and do something with Soaring Profits as well as the Benjamin Project, I think that'd be a lot of fun. And certainly something that's in our wheelhouse, try to get some promotion going. So I think that'd be very cool to take you up on.
I'd love to do it. Be very special. I love your neck of the woods too. It's beautiful up there. Yeah. And so that would be really wonderful. I would also just like to mention Lisa's website, because the Pet Anthology, which is the book that was written with 20 authors across the country that Lisa published, once again pro bono, about animals and our emotional well-being. She has the books, and she can fulfill those orders directly in a nanosecond. So if I could just mention that as well, that'd be
now, Malcolm, sorry, just while I've pulled up her website here, is it on her site, or?
So it's www.ottbookstore.com.
Okay, 1 second here.
There's a link on her website that takes
1,000 trees.
All her amazing books.
Sorry, OTTW?
No, ottbookstore.com.
So Lisa Browning, we talk about her all the time. Right now, she's watching. She is our number one profiteer. There is no one. I think she leads our fan club, I believe, of the profiteers, and we love her. And she gives us some incredible guests because she just lifts people up. Like she brings them under their wings, much like that she's brought us under her wing. And there's quite a few things that we're doing now through Soaring Profits because of her. But I know her books are inspirational, having read a couple of them and having met a couple of the authors. What I'm really interested in is your new book. So your new book is a collection of stories about animals, right?
That's correct. There it is. So it's about animals and their impact on our emotional well-being. I think it's a unique book. I've never seen a book like it, and this is a testament to Lisa. Yes. This is something that Lisa embraced, and just like she embraced publishing my kids' book. I mean, I wouldn't be able to be doing these things if it weren't for her and what she's done for the Benjamin Project and for the world. And that book was hand illustrated by Dr. Octava in Sault Ste. Marie, and the illustrations are really magnificent.
And very affordable.
Very affordable.
Very affordable. So can you give us an example of one of the key stories in the book that give us a little snippet, a little intro into what we might read if we bought that book?
I mean, Benjamin's stories in there and the impact he's had on our emotional well-being, Helen and I and our family. There's a story about Farley, for example, and Bo and Farley. Farley's a little mutt, and Bo's a wonderful human being, real Renaissance man for that matter. I mean, he works in technology, and he's a brilliant artist. Mm-hmm. And the stories are very authentic. I mean, people tell their stories. So I'm not telling any out of school. What Bo recounts about the impact Farley has had on his life and helping him through, like any of us getting through tough times. That's a special story. There are just so many others. There's another story about a fellow who lost his wife at a young age, and the impact that his dog had on him and helping him get through it.
Wow.
These are the kind of things that you're going to read in that book. Really, really compelling stuff.
So is it about the psyche and how the dog being an emotional helper has helped them through the steps of, well, in that case, it would have been dealing with the loss of a loved one.
Right. Exactly. It's stories like that, not just about dogs, of course, but different animals, different species, and how they've helped people overcome. And you know, that's on that book, and it's an incredibly special book. They all are. Sandra has a lot of her books on my website as well. She's an author and a wonderful person who, you know, is so kind to me in terms of the work that she does for me on our website, as well as gracing the 2023 calendar with her artwork, so on and so forth. So all that's to say that the animals have a real impact on us. That book honors that. And the other thing I was going to mention is, as part of the Benjamin Project, we have a scholarship fund, and kids can apply for the scholarship. And it's a nominal amount, just to be clear about it, a couple of $200-300, which is also what we use the money for that we fundraise. But 99% of it goes to shelters. The truth is that Helen and I self-fund a lot of the rest ourselves. But it's a scholarship fund, and kids send in an application, and the commitment that their parents have to sign off on is that check they get will be deposited until such time as they're in post-secondary, and the money will go towards post-secondary education, ideally in something related to animal welfare.
Wow.
So I can tell you the first scholarship winner, who's a 14-year-old girl, and her story's on our site, wrote about the impact that her pet had on her emotional well-being. Talking about a 14-year-old.
Wow.
The second award winner, I think she was about 8 or 9. Similar kind of story. So, you know, these are powerful stories, and you know, things happen to people of all kids of all ages. That scholarship and what we're trying to do with the Benjamin Project is help people and inspire them to you know, work towards and live towards a better day. And hopefully, and that 14-year-old girl said, you know what? And we had her come on a tour of Burlington Humane Society, which is a big supporter of ours, with Doug Shurton and his group over there. And she said, I want to be a vet one day. And I'm sure she will go and study and become one. And hopefully that check will get her on her way.
Malcolm, that's it. You're the second person we've had on that has established a scholarship process. And the other individual, Wendy Monsinger, we've interviewed her before, very same principles of the concept is that, you know, we're not talking about, you know, $30,000 here, you know, nobody's getting the first year tuition covered.
Right.
But it's such a meaningful contribution. And for Wendy's situation, she takes somebody that is a survivor, somebody that made it through, somebody that has, you know, overcome obstacles in their high school life and have come out the other side. And I think she's at what, James, about her 11th or 12th now.
I think she's on.
So this is somebody that, you know, these people aren't winning the top athlete. They're not winning the top academic, but they've survived and they've made it through like a process. And she's had people come to them and say, come to her and explain that little bit during that time in my life was so pivotal that it allowed me to know that I wasn't alone. And whether it was, you know, going and grabbing dinner that night or your little pocket money, it was just so meaningful. So like you were saying, that $200 or $300 that you're self-funding in that situation has such a huge impact on the people that receive it. and where they go next with that. And maybe they do become the next great, veterinarian surgeon and go on to do amazing things, right? And you're inspiring them. I think that's amazing.
I guess the long and short of it is that we're doing this to honor Benjamin because of what he did for us.
That's cool.
So the truth of the matter is this is all about him, and it's also about a lot of other people who help out along the way. And the truth of the matter also is that if it weren't for Helen, he never would have come into our lives. So I'm doing this to honor her as well, because they were inseparable.
Because she is the better half.
Better half of Fred.
Or so I have heard, at least. Yeah.
By far.
There you go. I love that.
And they loved each other.
I just think you're incredible. I think, like, just this whole talk that we've had from beginning to end, you keep on saying that Benjamin was a big part of your life, and obviously he was. But I think you're a pretty special, incredible guy, that you would take pain and hurt and turn it into, like, so many faceted things. Like, you have touched so many lives, from the child that maybe needs a leg up and, can give you an inspirational story about how an animal affects them, and then they may go in that direction of animals, to, like, maybe helping on the front end and teaching kids that, in grade 4 and grade 5, that, yeah, I don't need a bunny because I'm not going to take care of a bunny. So I'm going to tell mom and dad, you know what, I don't need a bunny because I'm not ready for that. Bunnies are a full-time job. There's more to it than just, they're cute. To helping people, like, keep their animals in their homes. I think everything, all of these little things that you've put together, that you're a little bit slighting yourself on, I think they're beautiful things. And I think, Malcolm, you're a wonderful person, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart to be a steward for these animals that quite often you forget about. Like, I'll see a dog on the street, and you might not do anything about it, but you're out there helping, taking care of on the sides that, raising money and educating. And I just want to say that I think that is incredible.
Well, thank you. It's very kind of you. It's just whatever, a little small part here, but thank you for having me on. I'm incredibly grateful. Really special. Never done this before, but just incredibly grateful for what you've done for me and for our project, www.thebenjaminproject.ca.
Yeah, you got it in there. I love it. That's great.
I can't thank you enough.
Plug it. Well, Malcolm, so this is where at the timeline in our show, I've got a little sign off. Remember, at the very beginning of this, I said there's no gotcha questions, none of that sort of thing. And this is where I lie. I lie right to your face.
A little bit.
There is a gotcha at the end of this. And what it is that we let you have the last word. So I want you to leave with the message, whether it's something like Bob Barker, have your pet spayed, neutered, and control the pet population, whatever you think at the end of it. But from me, folks, I want to thank Malcolm for joining us. What do you say? From a relationship with a dog a number of years ago that become a family member, and a legacy beyond what you probably would have ever thought when the first guy walked through the door that day when you got him. So, Malcolm, thank you so much for what you do. I'm absolutely going to be in contact with you and your organization in regards to our local society and seeing what we can put together. I think that is a great thing to do, and we'd love to partner with that.
Great.
And for me, guys, thank you so much. And as always, let's make some money together, folks. James.
And I am just enthused, and I'm excited. Like, yeah, if we could come up with some sort of partnership. I know I'm in education, and Pat's in finances, and I'm pretty sure the three of us sitting together, we probably could figure something out. And hopefully we can figure something out. I think what you're doing, Malcolm, is beautiful. I hope you keep on going and keep pushing forward. I'm going to have to take a look at that book because I love inspirational stories. I'm into psychology. And if you're linking animals and psychology, I think that's going to be a beautiful, beautiful read. And if you're out there, profiteers, $20 for $20, you can have a week of enjoyment reading emotional, wonderful stories that have been touched by Lisa Browning. And we all know anything Lisa Browning touches is gold. Mm-hmm. So get it there, buy the book, and take care of your pets and have them take care of you, because we all know that they know what you're thinking, and they're there for you in your darkest moments. So you need to be there for them in their dark moments. Let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together.
And Malcolm, this is where we stick you with that final word, pal. Don't let us down, eh?
I won't let you down. So you're a product of the 90s. I'm a product of the 60s. And on CJAD in Montreal, every single morning, Dave would sign off his show by saying, "Be kind to dogs and little people."